Everything begins in a dungeon where a monster that looks like a rabbit attacks a boy, but ends up being easily defeated by his sword. 2 other rabbits attack as well, but they're also taken down without difficulty. After making these movements, the human realizes that maybe he isn't as out of shape as he thought, and that he can still manage as a swordsman. When 5 goblins appear before him, the boy sees that it's time to test his support spells, so he casts Strength Increase, an ability capable of buffing his physical attributes or strengthening his equipment. According to the man, every adventuring group needs at least one member capable of using this type of technique, because it's very important to have someone who can raise the attack and defense of the whole team. By the way, by using this magic, he manages to defeat all the enemies one by one without taking any damage. However, even though he praises the qualities of this kind of enchantment, he admits that it has one central weakness: time. After 3 minutes of fighting, the enchantment ends, and when more goblins start appearing in the dungeon, he has to repeat the same ability to stay ahead in the battle. While he destroys his new opponents, the human thinks about how an individual's resistance to magic affects the duration of their enchantment. In his case, it's only 3 minutes, and sadly that forces him to constantly watch the time so he can reactivate the spell whenever it ends, making enchanters like him always fight an endless battle against the clock. The boy is able to handle a sword, which isn't common for someone of his class, but this limitation is still a weakness. And speaking of weaknesses, that's exactly why the young man was kicked out of his adventuring group without ceremony by its leader, Oliver. Remembering that day with anger, the enchanter argued that the 2 of them were childhood friends who had always fought together. But Oliver confessed that during all that time, he only gave Orhan a few chances because they came from the same village, and that from now on, they would go their separate ways. Annalie and Derek, the other 2 members of the team, were more direct in making it clear that Orhan was only slowing everyone down, so Oliver threw in the towel and admitted that he was expelling his childhood friend because he wasn't strong enough. Unable to believe what he was hearing, Orhan remembered how he formed that team with Oliver 8 years ago, and how they reached S rank in a short time, becoming the first group to reach the 94th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth, so much so that, because of that feat, they started being called the Heroes Party. With that memory in mind, Orhan acknowledged that maybe he wasn't strong enough. But if he wasn't, then no one in the group was. Oliver interrupted his friend to emphasize that they hadn't really understood the importance of an enchanter to the team until that joint attack last month, when they saw how incredible the enchanters from the other S-rank groups were, while Orhan was weak. Orhan admitted he wasn't that good because his real profession was swordsman. But even then, he developed his own original magic, not wanting to hear excuses. Derek and Annalie cut him off aggressively and reminded him that he only changed professions because he was worse than Oliver with a sword. But even in his new class, he didn't stand out. In response, Orhan argued that he only became an enchanter because the group needed one, and because he was the one with the most aptitude for it, pushing himself to the point of developing his own magic to compensate for his weaknesses, ensuring the group survived the deeper floors of the dungeons because of that. Once again, the boy was interrupted, this time by Oliver, who made it clear that they already had a replacement enchanter. This news shook the expelled member deeply, while Annalie commented without the slightest remorse that they were the heroes' party and couldn't be slowed down by someone who couldn't keep up with the rest of the group. Understanding once and for all that there was no place for him anymore, even though he couldn't believe he had been thrown away like that after everything they had been through together, Orhan headed toward the exit, heartbroken. The mage also pointed out that he was able to use some magic and a sword, but everything at a rank, and even so he kept trying to tell everyone what to do, which was quite irritating. According to the girl, people like Orhan are called Jack of all trades, a way to belittle those who only serve to fill in gaps and aren't that important. Filled with hatred over the way he was expelled from his team, Orhan can't swallow being called something like that, a Jack of all trades. Even so, he didn't leave the group empty-handed, since through his own effort, he figured out a way to combine his 2 professions, swordsman and enchanter, becoming an adaptable enough adventurer to make this fusion work effectively. With this technique he acquired, Orhan hopes never again to be called a jack of all trades, and that one day he'll be an adventurer capable of doing anything. After finishing his expedition in the dungeon, the boy registers the teleport crystal so he can return directly to the 7th floor next time. However, when he's about to leave, he runs into a group of adventurers who had to flee from a horde of orcs and were forced to leave a little girl behind. Because if they had stayed, the leader explains, everyone would have been killed. and he decided to prioritize his older companions. Orhan can't help but worry when he hears that, but he tries not to get involved in the problem, convincing himself that the girl was just unlucky to have joined the wrong group. However, he knows very well the pain of being abandoned by your team, and knowing that makes Orhan turn back and decide to intervene. Taken by indignation, he accuses the group of abandoning a teammate and then making excuses so they wouldn't have to save her, the kind of people who irritate the enchanter the most. One of the members responds that he wouldn't have been able to save the girl even if he had stayed behind. And since he's not the type to swallow an insult, he tries to punch Orhan, who easily counters and throws the kid to the ground. Quickly, Orhan asks where the girl was left. Speaking of her, the poor young girl was surrounded by orcs and on the verge of being devoured alive. In a desperate move, she plays her last card by invoking a magical shield to keep the monsters from getting closer, while they tried to break through the barrier and she screamed for her older sister. Suddenly, just as the defense shatters, Orhan arrives, unleashing an arrow shock and driving the enemies back. They immediately start attacking the man instead. As always, Orhan prepares his sword and buffs himself with strength, boost his main battle combination, then engages the orcs in close combat. He also activates technique boost to face opponents of that caliber, which makes the girl confused about this man's profession, since he seems to be both an enchanter and a swordsman at the same time. After defeating some of the orcs, the human casts sharpness boost to make his blade even more capable of tearing through the enemy's flesh. When he returns to the fight, the girl is impressed, having never seen anyone fight like that. Facing this horde, Orhan understands why that low-ranked group ended up running away. But he, on the other hand, knows he can handle this on his own. With that in mind, the swordsman heads into the center of the chaos and performs a series of strikes that shred a large portion of the monsters. Then, he displays technique and speed as he beheads his opponents with extraordinary ease, leaving the little girl more and more astonished by the extent of his talent. Soon enough, when the enchanter finishes off all the orcs, the girl collapses onto the ground in relief and starts crying. After getting the girl safely out of the dungeon, Orhan was simply saying goodbye, not expecting much, but eager to thank him properly for the help he gave. The girl says she is eternally grateful and introduces herself as Sophia Claudel. Hearing her last name, the swordsman finally notices the crest on her tunic, then introduces himself in return as Orhan Dura, a name Sophia really liked. Wanting to make up for the trouble she caused, the girl offers to pay for the boy's dinner. And although he says he didn't help her expecting anything in return, she is so intent on rewarding him somehow that he ends up accepting the invitation, even if a bit awkwardly. So she takes the enchanter to a restaurant whose sign carries the same crest as her clothing. According to the girl, it's a very cheap place, but the food is great. This confirms for Orhan that Sophia Claudel is indeed part of the Silver Rabbits of the Night Sky, one of the biggest and most popular clans in the Kingdom of Nohitn. Once inside, Sophia is startled to see her older sister in the establishment, and she explains that she's there for a meeting nearby. She asks who the boy with her sister is, saying Sophia is far too young to be dating. Embarrassed, Sophia panics and can't explain what's going on, until her older sister finally realizes she is standing before Orhan Dura. Scratching his head, Orhan says, "Long time no see, Selma Claudel." Sophia doesn't understand how this guy knows her sister, so he explains that Selma is the leader of the Silver Rabbit's most powerful S-rank, simply the strongest enchanter in the kingdom, largely responsible for making the enchanter profession well known, as well as creating the idea of group members having different roles. In the strategy she created, each team is divided into 3 functions: attackers, who take down the enemy; defenders, who act as shields; and supporters, who provide assistance. This strategy revolutionized the way adventurers carry out their missions, forever changing dungeon expeditions. According to Orhan, the hero's party is no different, and that's why he had to abandon his swordsman profession to become an enchanter. After seeing how strong Selma was in last month's joint assault, that's when his teammates decided Orhan wasn't good enough, which eventually resulted in his expulsion. Thinking to himself, he had already suspected the 2 girls were from the same clan, but had no idea they were sisters. Speaking of that, wearing an angry expression, Selma asks what this brat is doing around her 14-year-old little sister. Not knowing how to explain it properly, Orhan says he really was going to have dinner with Sophia, but that his intentions are pure, interpreting that as him saying her sister isn't good enough for him. Selma loses her temper and starts to raise her voice, so Sophia steps in to calm her down and explains that this man was the one who saved her life. Disappointed that Sophia went into the dungeon alone and without informing the clan, Selma reminds her that the day after tomorrow they were supposed to go together to the Great Labyrinth, and that the younger girl should never have done that. Since she's unharmed, the older sister isn't going to scold her, but insists she never repeat that behavior. Because Orhan saved her sister, Selma thanks him and apologizes for her harshness. Then the three sit together more calmly, and Selma mentions she hasn't seen Orhan since that joint assault last month when they met, and that this is the first time the two have talked like this. Since they're in the same class, they were placed together in that battle, where Selma took command and Orhan served as support. Selma praises the boy's performance that day, and Sophia comments that it sounds like her sister has known this guy for a long time. Selma is surprised that the younger girl had never heard of Orhan Dura, since he is a member of the hero's party. The girl is shocked to learn how important he is, but Orhan says he no longer belongs to that team, without revealing the exact reason. Hearing that, Selma asks if he is free, thinking she is about to recruit him for the Silver Rabbits. Orhan doesn't even let the girl finish and declines the invitation immediately, because he wants to stay without a group for a while. Selma explains that the young man misunderstood the situation. In reality, she has the perfect job for the Swordsman, accompanying her clan on the training expedition that will begin the day after tomorrow. This expedition is meant to recruit new members, where A rank and S rank veterans will lead these new recruits for 3 days as they descend to the 50th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. Impressed that this would take only 3 days, Orhan comments that the best novice adventurers would take 6 months to a year to do the same. Selma then explains that it's possible if they take the shortest route. She also admits that the expedition sponsors are demanding quick results. Orhan points out that even the Silver Rabbits have their own problems, but he still doesn't understand why the sponsors are pressuring the clan so much, even after such a bold promise regarding the expedition. Either way, since she's determined to move forward with this mission, the Swordsman thinks that if the goal is to strengthen the clan as a whole, then the novices who wouldn't be able to defeat the floor boss could explore the deeper levels on their own. Selma is impressed that he figured that out based solely on the little she said, which means he's sharper than she thought. In labyrinths, adventurers must defeat the bosses that appear every 10 floors in order to keep descending, and it's very common for recruits to die in fights of that level. But if the more experienced adventurers handle those battles, the novices can simply register at the crystal and proceed to the next floor. In fact, that's why the leader wants Orhan Dura to join this expedition. He asks if it's really okay for someone from the outside to be part of it. At that moment, the woman holds his hands, making him flustered, and emphasizes how much she respects him as an enchanter. The boy is glad to hear that, but it also reminds him of the reason he was expelled from the hero's party, not being as strong as Selma during their combined attack. And now she's asking him to return to being an enchanter, which doesn't sound very appealing considering the recent trauma he went through. Because of that, Dura ends up refusing the invitation. But Sophia says she's going as well and insists that he join them, shaking him a little. He promises to think about it more, but emphasizes that he abandoned the enchanter profession to focus on being a swordsman, and if he's going to take part in this mission, it will be in that role. Even though she's surprised, Selma accepts his condition, because deep down she believes that if things get heated inside the labyrinth, Orhan Dura will return to being an enchanter to deal with the situation. Either way, if he decides to participate, he must go to the Silver Rabbits' headquarters tomorrow morning. At nightfall, Orhan goes to the shop of an old man who, despite being close to closing, welcomes the boy warmly and offers him tea. After all, he feels enormous gratitude for all the promotion the boy gave the shop when he became a member of the hero's party, which boosted sales. Speaking of that, the boy apologizes to his grandfather before revealing that he's no longer part of the group. Even so, the elderly man says his gratitude for his grandson will never diminish, and that Orhan is still himself with or without that team. He knows very well how hard the boy worked to help, and that will never be forgotten. In the old man's opinion, people like his grandson are essential for society, and seeing how the boy struggles to accept compliments, he urges Orhan to receive such words of affection better whenever he hears them. Trusting his grandson's intuition and character, the grandfather asks him to do what he believes is right, because his journey is long and only just beginning. Therefore, Orhan should live for himself, but never stop helping others. Whatever happens, his grandfather will always be by his side. The next morning, Orhan Dura reports to the Silver Rabbits HQ. Seeing that he looks well, Selma asks if he feels relieved to have left the hero's party, and he answers that it's something like that. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.